Hi everybody, welcome to our Facebook Live. Today I feel really grateful to be joined by Marti Drucker. Marti is willing, which is just a huge thing, to share her story about when her husband was diagnosed with a serious illness and then the journey from that point to the end of his life. And thank you for being willing to do that, because I know
You are welcome.
It's a big thing. So I think we could really start. I'd like to learn a little bit more about Ian and you know, how long you guys were married, and just a little bit, fill me in a little bit about him.
Sure. So Ian and I were married for over 27 years, and there came a point in time when he decided that he needed to follow the call to become a preacher of the gospel.
Okay.
Which was a really big shift in our world, and so we entered into ministry full time, and so we ended up being side by side doing many things for a lot of years together, which was fantastic. And he was 56 when we found out that he had bladder cancer. And so that was quite the shift.
And he was really healthy before that, very active.
He exercised. He didn't have any of the normal vices that you would attribute to that. They never were able to figure out, what reason to blame it on, but nevertheless, he had, an aggressive form with some anomalies that made it especially difficult to be able to make it go away. So we entered on this journey that we didn't see coming.
So when he was initially diagnosed with the bladder cancer, did they give you the staging of it? Like, did they tell you how advanced it was?
Yeah, within a few weeks we learned that it was high-grade aggressive and that it was likely stage 3 already.
Okay.
Because he had several hernias in his bladder where the cancer had settled into, which totally made it not realistic to be able to get it all out like you might normally with a tumor. So we knew really quickly that we had a very unique difficulty that really lent itself to having to make some tough decisions.
So at that point, I'm guessing you're starting to have more doctor's visits and seeing oncology, and is there something that you found helpful during that process that really kind of...
Yes. When something like this happens, what you find is you're very quickly thrown into so many appointments.
Right.
And many of us have had the experience where you go and maybe you bring a friend or maybe 2 people and you
extra set of ears.
Yeah, you believe that that's going to take care of not missing any details. But we learned really quickly that even still we would miss some details, or we'd have different opinions about what was said or what wasn't said. So we found out a beautiful thing that we asked every one of our doctors if we could voice record the appointments on my phone, and they all were very amenable to that, which was great. So we voice recorded every appointment, and that came out so handy because it turned out there were quite a few times, it saved the doctor a lot of phone calls for one,
right,
but it also gave us a chance to be sure what we had heard and to make some better decisions based on that and form some better questions based on that.
Right, it gave you that space to sort of go back, re-listen, sort of process it, that time and space to process it.
Right, and so that turned out to be probably one of the most valuable things that we learned. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah,
I was afraid to ask the first time. I actually think I kind of hid my phone in the purse the first time, and then my conscience got the better of me. But the doctors were fine with it, which was kind of a surprise to me. So I recommend that, that anybody that, even for regular appointments now, I record them all because
that's a great idea.
It's just a handy thing.
So if you're just joining us, I'm joined today by Marti Drucker, and she's sharing some of the lessons that she learned throughout the journey with her husband when he was first diagnosed, and then sort of through that whole process up until the end of his life. And we welcome questions, comments, but we were talking a little bit about sort of the initial heavy diagnosis and a tip of making sure you audio record, which I think is super helpful. So during that process, when Ian, kind of was getting his options out there, shift? Like, so that at some point you understood from listening to your recordings and from talking to each other, and it sounds like doing your own research.
Yeah, I did quite a bit.
That, you know, you weren't gonna, he wanted to make some choices.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about that?
So about 8 months in, after several surgeries and quite a bit of testing and several opinions and a lot of research, we came to the conclusion that, you know, this was not a fixable issue, short of God removing it, which, you know, we were looking to see how God was going to handle that. And as it played out, Ian was able to just come to an acceptance because of the realities of what he understood, and because of his faith, and because of him being able to just shift into that new reality. And it actually made everything so much easier, because instead of running around chasing all the possibilities and looking for some way to make this go away, he faced it with just a joy and a peace that was different. And it was really,
that speaks to his character.
It did, and it made us able to jump into a very intentional way of addressing what we were facing.
Right.
Because it looked very likely that he was going to die early, that his body was not gonna make it through this. And so he began basically leading me through the process of all the practicalities.
Okay.
Things like knowing that as it looked that he was going to die, that there were arrangements to be dealt with, and he felt comfortable handling that with me. So
how far in was that to this diagnosis?
8 months in.
Okay, so that was
8 months in.
At what point, I want to back up a second, at what point, I know from talking with you a little bit before that he incorporated into his care the palliative and supportive care. At what stage did that sort of factor in?
So at about the 8-month point, after he'd had several surgeries and really the writing was on the wall, and just really came to terms with having to make a decision, you know, the doctors were actually wanting to attempt to take his bladder out and try to do some things, but
to be more aggressive.
Yeah, and in some cases that does work, and they really can extend somebody's time. Sometimes they actually can settle it down, but in Ian's case, we knew that the horse was pretty much out of the barn because of his anomalies. And so, armed with that information, he was able to just put some things in place. We had learned from being in ministry and walking through other people with their journeys going through end of life, that there were going to be symptoms, there were going to be things that were going to come along the way as this process unfolded. And he wanted to stay the best he could as long as he could, which was another reason he wasn't feeling prone to jump through doing some of the treatments and some of the more aggressive things, because he didn't feel that it was realistic for him. And so we were able to get matched up here with the hospice in Chesapeake and have a meeting out at our home and get lined up actually before symptoms started with a palliative team care group, which was really reassuring for me, because I knew then that we had a resource on hand when that moment came. Right. Because we didn't know at what point things would start to change.
So he started a little bit before he was actually hospice eligible. Absolutely. And met with Chesapeake Supportive Care. At his part, it was Chesapeake Palliative Medicine, to sort of start that process while he was still exploring options. Is that correct? Okay, exactly. So because at that stage, he could still be going for treatment.
He could.
And he just wanted to get that that supportive care in place to sort of, you know, help manage symptoms and look at the bigger picture. So that had to have been...
It was great, because we knew then, we went through the process, we knew that we didn't have to start the process in the middle of a crisis. We knew that we had it basically in our back pocket, ready to go. And we already began a relationship with all the great people that were part of that, and it was reassuring. And it turned out to be very, very wise, because probably about 4 or 5 weeks after that, some more serious symptoms did start.
Oh, wow.
And so it just was an easy transition into starting to ramp up some resources and tools that they were able to set us up with right in our home.
Okay.
You know, the ability for me to have phone contact at a moment's notice, which gave me a great deal of comfort to be able to care for my husband in the best way possible. And
so at that point, so we started with the supportive care team, and then because they were able to monitor him and kind of keep track of where his cancer was progressing, they were able to kind of guide you in the shift.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And it turned out it was about 4 months that we were dealing with palliative, which gave us the opportunity to go ahead and go do bucket list stuff.
Okay. Like what? What were some of the?
We got to go take weeks at a time and go hang out with some of our most special people. We got to have more special time with our family.
Because he wasn't so sick from all of the
and he
treatment.
had anything that was a symptom, he had tools with him that he could cover those symptoms and continue to maintain. And it was really great, and it was actually so well done that so many people were like, you know, but you look so good. You know, it was so fun. It's like, you know, you're supposed to be dying, you know, this is the idea, but you don't look that way. And
Right.
and I really attribute that to just having such a good management of these symptoms that were so random, and they came and they went, and you know, you just never knew from day to day. And for me as a caregiver, it gave me great peace just to know, you know, not only did I have, you know, a wide array of tools, medicines, different techniques, all kinds of things, and phone call ability, that I had confidence and
Right.
get out
that
and
you
about.
could do those things, do those
And
bucket
I would
list
know what
things.
to do for him, and you know, didn't have to be so fretful. So that was great.
If you don't mind, if you can share a little bit about when things started to shift.
Yeah.
So sort of that transition, I guess, from when, you know, hospice, it's appropriate now for hospice to come in.
So he had basically been dealing with mostly nausea, insomnia, some anxiety, and different things like that they were able to work with. And then suddenly, like I say, about 4 months into palliative care, we noticed that he started to have fluid in his arms and his upper area, which was, again, kind of an unusual presentation, but it became obvious that this was an escalation of some things that we had known would come. And we also knew that, you know, whenever the fluid starts like that, that's a pretty serious indicator. So we were able to seamlessly switch to having hospice care, which was the same people, and it was still in our home, which was so great.
Right. So you had already built a relationship, and just
and it didn't feel any different. It just opened the door to more care if needed, and it allowed for, you know, there were several times in the middle of the night that there was a concern, and they would come in the middle of the night and just be there and help us, you know, get it worked out, whatever it was. And again, it just continued to allow him to have the best quality for the longest period of time, and it allowed him to be peaceful and joyful through all of that, and it took a big burden off of me because I wasn't trying to figure it out on my own.
Right.
You know, they were able to set us up with, you know, a bed and just all the potential things that would make everything easier
And more comfortable.
as he was, you know, less able. And so it was just a terrific experience, besides of which there was counseling available for myself, which, you know, so many components that just kind of covered all these different areas for us.
So you touched on it a little bit before his life ended, and while he was still able to make decisions and think about things. One of the things that you all did was go visit and make arrangements ahead of time.
Yeah. Like most people, we had given a little bit of thought to what we might do if one of us died, but we really had to settle that at this point. So he settled on the idea of cremation, and so we found a facility near us, and of that arranging, and I was a little unsure if that was a good idea, but again, because he was accepting and peaceful about what was going on, it wasn't that hard for him. So it was actually a little funny because we went and you sit there at this very formal little table and they're trying to be very professional and which family member are you here about, and so I just kind of point to him and he's sitting there with this big smile on his face.
Yeah.
And they're kind of taken aback. They're not sure how to handle this because we don't normally get to meet our clients,
Right.
and especially ones that are handling it so well. And we ended up just beginning a beautiful little relationship with them. Again, we didn't know what our time frame was.
Right.
This was probably about 4 months before he died, but we didn't know that.
Right.
We just knew it was likely to come,
right.
and let's figure this thing out. And so this was a crematory right here in Glen Burnie, and they asked him if he had any questions, and he said, well, I would really like to have a little tour if I could. And they're like, sure. And I thought, well, this is interesting, but it was wonderful. I didn't realize how many little misgivings I had or concerns that I had. Never
like
really, it's sort of like
thoughts.
things you don't ever talk about.
Right.
It's kind of like that. But they took us through their facility, and it was wonderful. It was very state of the art. It was very clean, very professional, and they were able to explain to whatever degree of detail you wanted all the things that they did to care for you in that state. And I thought, this is really, really interesting, and it evaporated all my misgivings, all my concerns, and it became a non-issue.
Right.
And it was very relieving, and that surprised me. And again, it added to our little relationship with these folks,
Right.
which was kind of neat. And it gave me a picture behind the scenes,
Talk to me a little bit about this necklace.
Yeah, so this is one of my biggest treasures. So again, at that same meeting, they're giving us ideas of all the things that many people like to think about in terms of, making these arrangements. And so they were talking about this idea of many people choose to have a fingerprint picture made when they receive the body. And of course, Ian's sitting right there with me, and I kind of had a light bulb moment, and I thought, well, he's sitting here right now,
Right.
why can't we do this now? And they were like, that's a great idea. So they went and they got their little digital camera, and we decided on having it be his wedding ring finger, which was kind of a neat, just little moment. And so they took the picture of it, and what they told me is that it actually, because he was still alive, made actually a better impression than after death, which,
Makes sense.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I, again, had never thought about it. And what I learned is that anybody can go and get that done at any point before you have a crisis and have it on file, and know that you've got that kind of settled. And I really, really was thankful about that, because if I ever lost this, they've got it on file, and I can have it reproduced, and my girls can have it reproduced, and so we have all these things that we
Keepsakes.
learned. Yeah,
And it's a
and
keepsake.
it turned out to be just really special, the way they did that.
I think the other thing you had told me about before we were doing this was the how you decided to keep Ian's remains.
Yeah, that was one of the things I think that was also in that category of misgivings with the cremation. I've always been very leery of the whole urn thing.
Yeah.
Too many movies,
Right.
it never
right.
ends
like
well.
Just the, yes.
It's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
I just had an aversion to that, but I knew that I needed to do something. I knew that we weren't going to have a plot anywhere and all this. And so I was able to find that they had this most beautiful stone photo urn, but it's in the shape of a box. And so I was able to put a really relevant picture of him in the front of it. And we actually had it in our home well before he died, and people would be over and he's like, Martha, bring it out, let's look,
Take a look.
Like, this
Oh
is,
my gosh.
but that's how he was.
He
He was
sounds like-
so cool. So I'd bring it out and show people, it's just, but it took away, again, some of the sting and some of the awkwardness and some of the discomfort, and so it's something that I enjoy looking at. It doesn't make me feel bad. It's quite beautiful.
Right.
And I believe there may be a link that will come along with this too, which will give people a picture of what I'm talking about, because again, had never seen that anywhere, and just really enjoy it very, very much.
Awesome.
So
So let's sort of finish our discussion, if you don't mind, with the very end, and when he did die, and sort of, if you don't mind talking a little bit about that, how that went.
That was actually one of the things that has been most profound, because because he was able to be cared for in our home, that made everything so much better, and I was able to be with him all the way through, right up to the end, and being with him as he took his last breath was one of the things that was really, really important to me. And it was just very special, because we'd created this relationship with the funeral home. I already knew who I was going to be dealing with. I already knew that I could take my time. I did not know that in the beginning. I thought, the minute somebody dies, I had this idea that you had to call right away, and they reassured me, again, well before we needed to know that, take your time, call whoever you want to come be with you, let any of your family be there, that, as long as you want. And I thought, that's really important information. I didn't know that.
Right.
And it took a lot of strain off, and it caused it to be just a much more
Peaceful, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was just a much better way of doing it. And so then when they did come, being able to release Ian to them, because I knew them to some degree already, was much easier. And they did something that I've never seen done again before. And this is one of the things, again, being through many different people's journey to death, I've seen this so many times, when they come to get your loved one, they have that dreaded zipper bag.
Right.
And many
how hard
family
is that
members,
to have that as your last
many people,
visual, right?
they can't encourage the family to leave the room, so many times families see this, and it's just distressing, and it's something you can't unsee.
Right.
And what they did, this team came and they did the most beautiful thing, and it made all the difference. They did not have the zipper bag. They had a beautiful white linen cloth, and they placed it underneath Ian, and they wrapped him in it in a most beautiful way. They swaddled him up just beautifully and just had his face showing. And it was done with such honor and such dignity, and just in a very caring way. So when the time came that I was to release Ian to them, it was like I was passing him off to people that loved him and people that cared about him, that we had a relationship with, and it changed that piece in a way that I'll always have that now as a treasured memory, which is kind
Such
of amazing.
a different experience.
Yeah. It doesn't take away distress. Those moments are hard. There's no way around it. You can't bypass the grief.
It's still
It
there,
is what it is, but all these things have to happen.
Right.
And so I just have wanted so badly to try to help other people have this better experience. I haven't seen it enough to see enough people even knowing that they have all these resources well before they're even ill, to the point that they can't do anything. So many people wait till the last 2 or 3 days.
Right, and then you're in this emotional crisis, and everything has to be done rapidly, so.
And they haven't
what
achieved, the quality, a way of dying well.
Right.
And so I'd love to see that change.
Ian did it well. Ian
He did.
Absolutely,
He did.
and I'm really glad that you guys shared, or you shared his experience with us, so
Thank you. Thank you.
And his book?
Right, he wrote a book.
He did. He wrote a book called Life, Death, and the Things That Matter, and in the last few months before he died, again, because he was able to keep his quality, and he was able to just pour out everything into that book that he felt God had taught him, that he wanted to be able to pass down to our family and our grandkids and anyone else that it would help. And so he did just a great job, and that couldn't have happened if he wasn't able to maintain enough quality
Quality of life,
And so I just cannot thank enough, because it really did help make all the difference between that and everything that he believed about God, all the difference in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing and giving some of your experience and wisdom. Very, very much appreciated. Also want to thank the John and Kathy Belcher Institute for their generous support of the community education programs here at Hospice of the Chesapeake. Thank you again for watching.